Do you think the writing has pinned themselves into a corner, or have they given us a huge hint as to the prince that was promised? And the reason I ask and bring this up is I'm going to go ahead and read directly on this. And let me actually, I'm going to do like a little interactive thing with you. I'm going to ask you questions to see what your thought process is before I bring this up, right? So, do you remember when Melisandre was always with Stannis and calling him the prince that was promised and stuff? And we find out later on when, I forget who's the one that translated it, but because it's in High Valyrian, maybe it was Missandei.
It was Missandei.
Yeah, Missandei who translated and said the actual translation is the prince or princess who was promised. So you remember that?
Yeah, what's funny, ironically, I just watched this episode again the other day.
Oh, perfect.
But yeah, it was Missandei that
right.
Translated it.
So it's Missandei, right? And, she's a translator. She speaks multiple languages. Now, do we think that she can speak better High Valyrian than Viserys Targaryen and Rhaenyra Targaryen? Probably not, right? Right. And the reason I bring this up is if they speak High Valyrian as like their primary language. Now, obviously, they have to use a common speak around everyone else because they don't know Valyrian. But the whole issue is now we have a direct translation from the Targaryens' own mouths that translate it as this. This is what was said, and I made sure I had the captions on, so I wrote it down word for word. On that blade, when it was heated up and they read the translation, Rhaenyra reads it. From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire. An emphasis on his. That doesn't sound like it could be male or female. That sounds like it's supposed to be male. Am I right or am I wrong? What do you think?
Yeah, man, this brings up so many questions. Because it makes me wonder like whether they're going to try to correct that in the Snow series. Dany's brother's dead, and if Dany's actually dead, so the only option you can really do, because that line is extinct at that point.
Not technically. Jon Snow's still alive.
Oh, well, okay, Jon Snow. But he sent him to the wall. I think the only option is to have the Snow series. I think maybe they're trying to correct some wrongs. But then it makes me wonder, too, what is the role, really, of the cat's paw dagger in this whole thing? Even if it was just the point of Arya Stark and the Night King, with a closed brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes. I mean, maybe that's an answer someone can give me. But no, I agree with you. I mean, it clearly says his, unless they're just like taking it script by script, and that word really does translate to prince or princess, but clearly we know it wasn't Dany. So, and still you have this whole dawn thing. Like, is that the sword of the morning, sword dawn, or what is that? I mean, it brings up a lot of issues that you and I have talked about so many times, beating a dead horse. Which I think, we said Cersei should have been green eyes, Night King blue eyes, and you could even say maybe Arya should have been the brown eyes after she killed everybody and closes Arya's eyes. I got so many thoughts on everything. The problem is, like, this isn't clear. Like, this makes... I think eventually we will have something where the prince that was promised, but you're going to have to bring Jon back. That's your only option. I mean, and that's still in the books. That's a whole nother thing. It's not even clear if Jon's alive. So I don't even know if they know where they're going. What are your thoughts on this?
Dude, it's just, like I said, either they gave us a huge hint or they really painted themselves in the corner for another plot hole from Game of Thrones. Shocker, right? But, I don't know. Because, like, there's no way you're going to convince me that Targaryens, direct descent from the Valyrian bloodline, are going to mistranslate their own language. Especially back then when they used High Valyrian to speak to each other when no one else was around. And, like, that was their mother tongue, right? Like, to me... There's no chance a slave translator 200 years later is going to know better Valyrian than I wouldn't say the original Targaryens, but a much closer to the original Targaryens than what we got 172 years later with Daenerys, right? So, I don't see how you can get away with still being able to say prince or princess, or it could still potentially be a female, because she said it straight out on the dagger in High Valyrian, as language that they speak primarily. It says, and his will be the song of ice and fire. Did not say his or hers or prince or princess. On the dagger, it specifically said it, and she read it out directly, line for line. And like I said, it's very hard for me to be convinced that she does not know full Valyrian. And like, who knows? And on top of that, let's say she didn't for whatever reason. Maybe she just wasn't as fluent. I definitely think King Viserys is, and he could have corrected her and been like, well, no, that's not directly what it translates to. Because he's giving this whole dagger to her and like the whole promise to her to carry on. So why would he do that if he thought that she wasn't wasn't supposed to be the person to carry this secret going forward? If because you would like to think that he could be like, oh well, no, like keep in mind this says prince or princess, and it would be like, and his or hers will be the song of ice and fire. He could have said that, and really kind of solidified the fact of her being the next queen in line, just in case anything happened underneath her rule, and maybe she was the one that was supposed to bring him like to the Great Dawn or whatever it was called. So it's just interesting because he didn't correct her, so he must have been right along the lines there and also agreed with what she said, because she read it straight from the dagger. He was there and watched her read it, and he had no corrections or added anything to it. He just kind of let her soak in what the meaning of this was and how important it was for the future going forward, and how it's bigger than the throne, it's bigger than the kings, it's bigger than herself. There's this whole deal. So I don't know. I really think that either they pushed themselves into a corner, or they gave us a huge ass fucking hint about who the Prince of Promise was.